Heaven and hell. Does heaven and hell really exist? Do you think it exists? What do you feel about it? What would you actually do if you actually got to greet heaven one day or hell one day? They say to die and go to heaven is to live a glorious life in the afterlife. It's to be smooth sailing and there's no problems. You're away from all guilt, animosity, and everything else. The very thing in life which burdens human life down here on earth. To escape that supposedly is to go to heaven, right? And yet to do bad deeds and commit bad crimes and commit heinous crimes and all foul acts against other humankind and to supposedly live the not so right way by religious standards is to actually fall into a deep pit of hell where your whole soul and everything is set aflame, and you're left to rot in torment in the pits of hell. That's what you're told. That's what I was told as a young child, and I never once ever believed that. See, when I was a young child growing up, I was served all these stories of how if you don't do this right and you don't do that, you were going to hell. And yet for my end, on my own mindset, even being a young child, 9, 10 years old, I didn't believe in any of that I was going to rot in hell if I mistreated others or if I stole from the candy store or any of that. I didn't believe in that. For me, that was all nothing more than fairy tale, fable stories made up by man in order to place fear within me so that I will abide by laws. You got what I'm saying? As a young child with a young developing mind, I never believed in that sort of thing, that if I don't do right, then I'm going to pay for it with flames set ablaze. I didn't understand that because, see, to live a human life is to live a very long life. Even if I was to take it upon myself, when I say all this, I want you to use reason. When you listen to me, I want you to use your logic and reasoning skills in me explaining this. Pay attention closely. To live a human life is to live a very long life. Even as a child being told at 8, 9, 10 years old that if you don't live right, you're going to hell, right? We all live very long lives. Many of us, not everybody makes it through. Some people die younger. Some people die off younger for whatever reason and purpose, right? They serve their purpose supposedly in that. So to live a long life is to have a lot of various experiences within that time period of meeting and greeting other people as you go along. And yet many of those relationships don't always go as they're supposed. A lot of times relationships step up on the scene to teach you something. And sometimes you don't have the best reaction in the area of getting along with that other person. So it poses you sometimes to mistreat that other person just like they mistreat you. And this goes on for a whole lifespan, right? This is a lifespan because life is all about lessons. And yet you're constantly told within that time frame of a young child all the way up until death that if you don't live right, you're going to hell, right? And you're also told that a God will forgive you even along the way in areas of you messing up in these different relationships of you mistreating others and them mistreating you, right? It does not make sense to tell me that I'm going to hell in any of that if I mistreated somebody. That doesn't make sense because to pay for a sin is to pay for all your sins. And yet to live 1,000,001 reasons right here on earth. Remember, every single season that you live here on earth, there's within seasons are seasons. So we have winter, spring, fall. We have all those different seasons. But within those seasons, we as humans are actually living our own seasons. So you might go somewhere and work or meet somebody and become involved in a relationship for 2 months. And then that time period is over with. And yet within that 2-month time period, you and that other person might be completely mistreating one another. Or that person might mistreat you or you might mistreat them, right? So that's a season within a season. right? All things come to an end. It's the same with life. Life is a whole complete season of nothing but experiences that span a long lifetime. So to say that if I don't get right, when I die, I'm going to go to hell and I'm going to pay for all my sins, that's a lot of sins. That means that everybody on this earth will in fact be going to hell for paying for all their sins. Because remember, every single day, people who feel that they're living right are in fact not living right. And people that feel that they're not living right are some of the people that are in fact living right. Because remember, to live this life sometimes is to go through experience good and bad so that you can learn and be taught certain things of how to live here on this earth. Not completely properly, but just to understand the experiences of life itself, right? So no one can really tell you what is right and what is wrong properly living here on this earth, because God can send you any type of anything. It could even be devastation. And yet a very biblical studying person, a person that's really religious, will tell you, well, maybe you're sick and this, or maybe somebody in your family has died because you haven't lived right. Well, who's to exactly say? Maybe that was there for a lesson, to teach you something. Who knows? So it does not make sense for me to be told that I'm going to heaven, or I'm going to hell. I'm sorry. It does not make sense for me to be told that I'm going to hell based upon all my sins that I had led and lived on this very earth at 95 years old. Say I die at 95 and I'm told constantly today I'm going to hell because I'm not living right. I haven't lived right from day one. I haven't lived right since the womb. Because remember, to come out the womb is to not know anything at all. You must be told. To come out the womb is to not know anything. You're fresh out of the womb, so you have to be guided and told what to do. And yet, you're guided by parents, you're guided by grandparents, you're guided by mentors fresh out of the womb. And who's to say that that information that they give you is in fact the right information? Some of that information might be the wrong details of them implanting into you for you to live your life. It might not be completely right by God's standards or even by society standards. Who knows? They could be, see, growing up, you could actually be molded by these older adults, and they might be actually teaching you the wrong way. And then you grow up one day in life and be like, man, they didn't teach me nothing at all. Or they taught me in a way that they knew, but it wasn't absolutely the best. And you come one day to realize during self-actualization that a lot of things that you were taught and told, even by society, was the wrong way. So what is in fact the right and wrong way to live life? That's why I can't really get caught up in the Bible, more so of me going to hell, because you can't really say what is the right and wrong way to live in order for me to just get to heaven and not seek hell. That's what oftentimes you're told by the Bible thumper. And I'm not trying to disrespect them, but some of them even need to open their eyes to the fact when it comes to living this life, there's really no right or wrong. Because see, you gotta mess up in order to learn a lesson. You gotta be shown certain things to understand the lesson of it all. Life itself is nothing more than life lessons. And it's not in the area to learn how to live perfect. It's just so that you can learn to see things and understand certain things as they are. You know what I'm saying? As well as to live comfortably, but not to try to gain perfection in any of that. See, to be a human being is to never gain any type of perfection, no matter how you try. Because we were born from the very beginning, from the womb, and even before that, as faltered beings. We're faltered. So we can never live up to these standards. That's another reason why I can't practice the Bible. I can't live up to all that's being spoken of. So more likely, in the terminology of hell, and me escaping that, I probably will never, if someone want to say that I will never make it to heaven because I'm not living right, then say that. If you want to tell me that, then that's fine. But I will never be able to live up to the full capacity of escaping hell. That's what I'm trying to say. If you're telling me I'm going to hell, then maybe so. Because you yourself that's saying that might actually be going with me. Because to live human is to constantly never live up to a standard. You can't do it. You're human. Human completely means imperfection. So that's just an interesting conversation. Does heaven and hell exist? I always feel and sense in my soul that as above, so below. Somebody might say, well, that's wicked in itself. No, it's not. Because to die is to return back. Life itself is nothing more than a life cycle. Didn't I say that? The rebirth. You have Buddhists that believe in reincarnation. The life cycle itself will show you when things die, something else must appear upon the scene, because that keeps all life existing, even animal life in the animal kingdom. So a plant is there and it's alive, and yet cattle went and ate that so that that cattle could actually give life itself to human beings. This is a life cycle process. What is born must actually also return. So if I am in a physical form, being a human being, and my mother gave birth to me, and yet underneath that is a spiritual being, see, it's a duality, and even in that, being physical is also being spiritual, because the physical actually encloses a spirit. So when you die, the physical form must return back to somewhere. So it's returning back to earth, right? And it decays away. It's the same with the spirit. The spirit must return back to something. The spirit must return back to something. A spirit cannot just die off and that's the end. There's no life in that. It has to even return back to universe or God, just even for survival in that, right? So how could you tell me that hell exists if when you die, your body doesn't go to hell or doesn't go to heaven? That does not make sense. To die is to return back to something. It's to return again. If I die tomorrow, my body has to be put in the ground so that I can decay off properly. That also, I don't know, that doesn't really serve the soil in a sense, but that serves my bodily form to be put back somewhere. So when I die, my spirit has to go somewhere. If I didn't come from hell, why would I return back to hell? That makes no sense. That's an argument in itself. I will really piss some Christian people off, and I have. And as I go along, I'm probably going to actually piss off more of them. And maybe they should actually be pissed off. Because see, to use your brain and your logic skills, and even to use your intuition, which is a gift by God, is to see and understand that heaven and hell does not exist. Because to die is to return. It's to go back. See, nothing in this life, in this human form of life, nothing is ever new. Everything moves in a circle, in a cycle, within a lifespan of a time period. Right? Everything is moving in a circle. So, if everything is moving in a circle and nothing is new under the sun, what makes you think that heaven and hell is more newer than earth itself? Heaven and hell might be right here. That's what I'm trying to say. It might not be all out there and all up here and all down there. It might be right. We might be standing in heaven and hell as we're sitting here talking. And yet when we die, we might just completely unclothe ourselves, as in walk away from our physical shell, and just become one with the whole universe, or one with God in a particle sense. You might be a free-floating particle. See, when my dad died, he wasn't living right. And I got banged upside the head by religious people within the family that told me, because he was doing illegal activity, I was told that he went to hell, supposedly. That man might be sitting beside me right now. in particle form. And I can't even see them and might not even know, because to become a particle, as in return, is to go back on the other side, which is what some people call the afterlife. See, all these terminologies get you mixed up in the head from the get-go. It's all terminologies to put a definition to something, so that you can present an ideal to somebody, so that they can make sense and be less fearful in where you go when you die, right? It even serves comfort in that for the grieving family members of those who have died and the dying. Putting a terminology to that even helps those. It gives comfort so that people are less fearful in dying. So, who knows? Your loved one, as you're sitting here watching me, your loved ones could be sitting at a table somewhere in your house as you're watching me on this very video. And yet they're a particle form. You just can't see them there. They're one with the whole universe. They just been stripped in their clothing being, which is the physical. I don't think hell exists. Because see, to live a very long, I'm going to repeat this again, to live a very long lifespan, when people say get right with God, you better hurry up and get right with God. You can never be fully right with God. Not living here on this earth, because remember, God might forgive your past sins, and yet they never leave. They're still there. Those sins that you committed are still there. They ain't left. They ain't went nowhere. And yet some people are still reliving their sins today. I'm saying those past sins, people that are telling me to get right with God and telling other people to get right with God, many of those people's past sins that they supposedly put away, they're still living in those sins today. The sins never left. Because some of these people that are telling me that, they're the same way and the same individuals that they were years back. The only difference was many of their family members have died. You know, they have been through different situations and lived through different situations, and yet their attitudes and opinions and everything else, nothing has changed. They're the same complete individual that they were years back. Even some of these individuals, I'm told by other people, is the same way that they were in their childhood. The only thing is that they have drifted in and out of different various situations. And yet their mind hasn't even been fully altered by those situations. So they're the same person. So how is God going to judge that when they meet and greet the other side? That's my question. You can't sit around and tell people and judge other people and look at other people and point fingers at other people saying you're going to hell because you have not gotten right with God. You can't say that if your life hasn't changed and you haven't changed your consciousness. You got what I'm saying? That's a low level being in itself spiritually. I hear that from so many people. What I notice, people who are not spiritually evolved, if that's even a word here on earth, different terms. Oftentimes people that I hear tell me that I'm not going to heaven and I'm going to hell, those are the less evolved people spiritually that I've ever met. And I don't know why that is. I'm saying they're stuck and stagnant on a conscious level, spiritually. They know the Bible, they can quote the Bible, they read the Bible, but they don't know nothing else beyond that. They can't tell you why a scientist went and took a spaceship up towards the moon to try to figure out much more, even in the area of sciences where it might meet spirituality. Because see, some of these scientists that are propelling themselves up in space, some of them scientists are not just joining NASA to go up in space just to read about Mars. They're studying that because that's their job, but some of them actually want to know more about God and the universe in the area of spirituality. And yet if you present that fact to people that are very biblical oriented in areas of them studying and reading the Bible, I'm saying the really church people that bash other people, many of them hate and despise the very scientists that are trying to understand the world. So I'm saying, all I'm basically saying is, Many Bible thumpers, they don't understand the world outside of themselves in that Bible. They don't. I was holding a conversation with somebody, and they told me when they go to church, they don't want to hear the preacher talk about his life and his experiences. They just want to hear about Jesus. And I said, that's not living real life. Because in order for that preacher to obtain members to come to that church is to be relatable. That preacher has to be relatable to his congregation. That's the only way he's going to drive in people to come and actually sit right there when he's in the pulpit area. You can't draw to you what you're not relatable on. You can't be heard what you're not relatable on. To want to run a church is to get there and stand in the pulpit as a congregation sit amongst you and for you to tell all your trials and tribulations. Because the very people that is watching you, the pastor, they have real problems. Those people in the congregation have real problems, and they want to relate to a real individual. Yes, they do. They don't want to sit hearing about Jesus all day because remember, Jesus is not here. And for some people, even that's practicing the religious faith, for many of them, it's quiet, unkept secret, but many of them don't even fully believe in Jesus because remember, they never seen him. They never seen his face. They just been brought up, told what a Jesus figure is. And yet they're suffering trying to make it through day-to-day life. And so to not be able to meet a man and yet be told of amazing gifts that he held and yet not to be able to shake his hand, and yet you're suffering trying to figure out how you're going to pay the light bill, and hopefully your gas and everything else is not shut off, and you being evicted or becoming close to eviction because you can barely pay your bills, and plus the pastor or whoever is asking, passing around the offering plate to you, is to want to be surrounded by other people who are not only just real, but to be surrounded by a pastor who is more relatable than just Jesus himself. Because a lot of times people say Jesus is going to help you, Jesus is going to save you, but a lot of times Jesus is nowhere to be found when it's time to pay a light bill. And your family is sitting in the dark and you're forced to eat nothing but pinto beans out of a fry pan that you just put on the stove with some hot dogs just to have a meal, some sustenance to get you through the day, and yet Jesus never once shows up. There's people in the church right now that understand this very theory that I'm speaking on, and yet they still go to church. And they're in question of even Jesus' whereabouts in that. Because to go through suffering is to start to ask 50 million questions. Yes, it is. To read a Bible and be told that Jesus saves and Jesus lives, and Jesus told you yet that suffering is for humankind and for human life to teach you a lesson is enough still in itself to say, I'm going to this church. Why is Jesus not appearing once on the scene to try to help in any of my own personal suffering? That in itself doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. This individual was telling me, and I was telling them, you know, you can't get up in the pulpit and just preach about Jesus. That stuff is not going to make it. People don't want to sit hearing in nobody's church hearing about Jesus being the greatest thing, because even that makes them people feel like they're a failure. Feel what I'm saying? If I sit on the pulpit and I preach about Jesus all day, me being the pastor that I am, and I run a church, and yet I never speak on my own trials and tribulations, and I just say how wondrous Jesus is, and yet I never show and express myself for a faulty human being I am, people can't relate. They can't relate because they get to looking at Jesus like, well, Jesus is the best thing that ever existed, but what about me? I'm suffering. I can't even feed my kids, and yet Jesus is so great. I'm working 2 jobs, 9 to 5. I'm working 2 jobs to pull in some money, and yet my lights just got turned off, and now I'm facing eviction with 4 kids. And yet Jesus is nowhere to be found, and yet I'm hearing about how glorious he is and how one day I'm going to meet them. That actually turns people off, and it turns them away from church. Yes, it does. Suffering in itself can turn you away completely from religion itself. That's why a pastor has to say what all he been through. his good times, his bad times more so. He has to show and express everything tragedy wise he has experienced. If you want to keep people in your church, you have to do that. That's more important than presenting the show of Jesus. It is. Because suffering today is very real. People is getting killed, murder, all type of stuff is going on right now as we speak. So, heaven and hell. The existence of heaven and hell. I think people, religious people, they don't agree. They feel like scientists want to run the world. But like I told somebody, it's been purposed by somebody for these scientists to run the world and operate and act as God. Yes, it is. Somebody designed these scientists to act like that, because remember, to sit reading nothing more than the Bible is to never end up anywhere in life. You can't solve problems because you're too busy waiting on a biblical figure, someone like Jesus, to come save you. And I'm not bashing him. I'm just speaking the reality of life to help and expose to other people that may not practice religion and those who practice Christianity. You can't sit reading the Bible just expecting Jesus to show up. All of us will die off. Humankind will completely die off. And there will be nothing left. And God in the universe will be completely upset in even that. Yes, a God or the universe will be completely upset that us human beings sit around reading nothing more than the Bible and not solving our own problems. Somebody had to come and take it upon themselves and step up to the plate and say, you know what, there's various problems here on this earth that need to be fixed and solved and tinker with and experiment with, so that we can live somewhat of a better life, so that we can cure cancer. There are religious people that practice the Christianity faith, even certain Muslims that don't believe in transplants and in the area of even technology of curing cancer. Technology serves the benefit of sustaining life a bit longer. And even that information was given by God or the universe. It had to. Because to not sustain human life is for all of us to die off. And that wasn't the purpose of God or the universe. It wasn't. Something had to be here, placed here to sustain human life. Information comes from God or the universe, right? And yet information is never new. And yet to go back is to gain information, old information, bring it and present it as something new in the form of technology to sustain us all. So this earth, yes, this earth can exist without us. 7.6 billion people, the earth can exist without us, but there is a reason why we were placed here as human beings. It's a reason why. With that, all human life serves a greater purpose, big or small. So to die, once again, is to return. I like to repeat, to die is to return. So why would you be a human being? Oh, let me go back. Let me rewind back to what I was saying about religious people need to step outside of their world of just holding the Bible and not problem solving. See, when I was younger and I was a kid, I used to always just hear people say, well, just give it to God. Just give it to Jesus. No, not give it to God. Give it to Jesus. All your problems will be solved. Just give it to Jesus. And as I'm sitting there, nothing is solving. And not only that, bigger problems is popping up on the scene. And not only do I have one problem, but now I got 1,000,001 problems. All because I took the time to sit listening to somebody saying, give it to Jesus. And yet Jesus was nowhere to be found. And yet I was over the head in all these swimming and in all these problems. A traffic full of problems, right? I had to take it upon myself to start looking at scientists and how they solve their problems. Because see, the scientists, many of them are a lot further than the Bible thumper. Because see, the Bible thumper will sit around all day just waiting for things to be handed to them and screaming that Jesus provided them with a miracle. And yet it took so long for them to actually obtain that thing, right? But the scientists went out and actually made that very thing happen. They didn't have a choice. Because see, to not put out certain technology in the area of a resource to save humans from stuff like cancer and stuff like that, is to just walk into a area of disaster. Because what that poses a problem is, the more that we grow, the more diseases grow. The longer human life exists, right, breeds more populations of people, which also breeds more filth, because not all people take care of themselves in the area of physical, taking a shower, washing their hand. So that presents more diseases being spread to other populations of people, even from the world. I can catch something today, get on a flight, and pass that off to somebody all the way over in Asia, all the way over in China, and it kill off 100,000 people in the process. So that type of stuff has to be maintained by somebody, and it can't be maintained by the Bible thumper who is just saying give it to Jesus. That type of thing has to be maintained by the scientist himself, to go under with a light and a microscope to say, you know, okay, I know what this actually is. This floating micro organism or whatnot, I can see, you know, what this is. And so we are going to figure out the situation to solve this, to prevent this from spreading. And then they go and they get some guys that come out in a suit with a thing that looked like a gas mask and everything to protect themselves, with gloves and boots to prevent that very thing. You know, they go in the area and they stop that. They contain it. They cut that area off to prevent it from spreading. A lot of people that's holding the Bible, they're not going to take it upon themselves to go do all that. And yet to not go do all that is to kill off millions of billions of people. If you don't contain a virus for what it is, like a scientist will do, then you're killing all human life off. Men, women, children, even species. Because some of these human viruses can even be spread to species. Yes, it can. That whole thing is a prey. Remember the movie? I think it was called Prey. I don't even think that movie. No, that wasn't about that. But even scientists going in the area of, you know, the creating of test tube babies. You got religious people that carry Bibles that are not with that. And yet even life should be given to those who want to have a baby. They should be able to have the choice. See, human life in itself is about the enjoyment process. It's not just about ourselves, is what I'm saying. I can't stand anywhere holding a Bible telling somebody that wants to be a mother and hold her own child in her arms, and yet she can't have her own child through the womb because maybe something is wrong, or maybe she's infertile or something. I can't take it upon myself to sit amongst that woman and tell her, you know what, you can't have a test tube baby. That's not right. She should be able to have that, because see, she might not have the uterus that can formulate a child specifically and fully, and yet she might have the mind to actually raise and develop that child. So who's to say? There are many people that hold the Bible that say they don't believe in the practices of test tube baby, or even in the area of the color of the changing of the eyes, where you have the option of changing your baby's eyes or hair color and stuff like that with new technology. I have a book on that, or I had a book on that. I think I ended up donating it to the library, but it was a very good book about how in the genes you could change the eye color of your baby, your child, before it was born, as well as the hair color, right? You had these different options or whatnot. I like stuff like that. I think it's intriguing. It is. It really is not posing any damage when it's done right. But once again, you can't tell somebody they shouldn't have that option, because remember, you only live on this life one time. Even if rebirth is done in the area of reincarnation, say if that truly exists in the area of Buddhism and stuff like that, you still only live once in this particular body. Maybe if reincarnation is real, maybe in this body, in this completeness as it's been already formed, maybe in this exact body, not in the next body which is going to come afterwards, maybe in this lifespan, in this body, maybe you want to actually have a test tube baby. That's your right. You should be allowed and given that right, and not told what not to have just because somebody is deeply religious. It serves no justice to a whole of humanity to be deeply religious in the area of carrying a Bible around and feeling that the scientist is mischievous. These scientists have to test stuff. They have to. They even have to take it upon themselves to go off in designated areas that have been guarded off and leashed off from public to blow up stuff. You know what I'm saying? To see what comes out of it and how it's going to serve human life. There's a good side and a bad side to everything. That in itself can lead to disaster as you're blowing up stuff. Lives can be lost, and even that, the experimentation process. But to not experiment is to not to see greater possibilities. Because to experiment is to not only find one answer, you can actually find multiple answers. That's why you have many medications out here that can be used for not just one thing, but multiple things. Not just used for one disorder, but for many disorders. And not even just used for a disorder. You got medications out here that can be used for depression, but then you don't even have to use it for depression. It states on the bottle or in a transcript paper information, in the form it says, on the documentation it says it can also be used for women who are in menopause that have hot flashes. So many of this stuff is multi-purpose. That's all I'm trying to say. Scientists, when they do their experimentation, and Bible people are against that type of stuff, many of this stuff is multi-purpose activity. It's used for the greater good of the whole of humanity. It can be flipped and used for various things. And yes, all things do hold a good side as well as a bad side. That's everything. To maintain a balance is to have both. You can't have a gravitational center, right, without having something to hold to balance. That doesn't make sense. That's not common sense logic. And so I think in the area of the biblical figure, as in the Bible thumper, the church person or church figure who like to scream and shout about God and yet hate the scientists, I think their sole purpose is to maybe help maintain balance here in society. See, you need the scientists. You can't live without the scientists, and you can't live without the over religious person, because both of them can get carried away to the point of going to extremes. I'm saying the scientists can experiment too much to the point of getting carried away, and experiment to the point of, what's the word for it? Scientists. If I got a scientist and a churchman, those two things can become two extremes, and yet you have to have a middle ground somewhere. So I think that the scientist serves the purpose of experimentation, right? For us to explore. Because even back in the caveman days, somebody had to say, you know what? If we just live and settle in this one place, we're going to die here. There were scientists back in the caveman days, and yet at that time he wouldn't been considered a scientist. He was considered the explorer. He just had an open mind, and yet he had the body and everything else, the makeup of a caveman. He was seeing right there, he was dressed up in cloth or whatever and saying, you know what? We can't live here. He was speaking in his caveman language. We can't live here because we're going to die. It's about to get real cold. So we got to go move somewhere else. And as him and the tribe moved and went somewhere else, they had to explore. Somebody within that group, it might have been a tribe of, say, 10 to 15 people in that tribe. But while the tribe was carrying on as every everyday activities of cooking and the women making the meals and feeding the children and, other members who were males going fishing. They had to maintain that. But then you might have had two explorers in that tribe who were manly figures who had to go out and go travel somewhere to see what was coming next and where to go in the process of evolution, in a sense, moving from one place to the next so you don't die out. So that's who the scientist is. The modern day scientist, that's what we have. They're into exploration to keep us going as a whole. To not keep going is to die out. Exterminate. Why am I twisting my words? Extermination. There we go. I needed to see. A lot of times when I mess up my words, it's because I'm rushing through. Extermination. Plus, I don't write out nothing. I just go freely. Thought flow. My thoughts. I go where my thoughts lead me. Extermination. So, if you don't keep going, you are exterminated. Human here in society. That's what the scientist is. They're deep explorers. And yet, on the other end, you got the church figure, the church man who is a Bible thumper who don't a lot of times believe in any of that. He just wants us to live by the Bible, practice the Bible, and not go beyond that. But that stands in death. Even spiritually, that's death. If you don't internally, consciously go up to a higher level. But even outside of that is the physicalness. You got what I'm saying? If you're living here, all these human beings, and you're not moving around, and yet you're evolving, and yet you're moving spiritually, going to a higher level consciously, and yet you're not moving physically, you're around 7.6 billion people. And to just live, when I say that it's death, in that, you being a spiritual being and yet just sitting here reading that Bible saying Jesus will cure everything, that's death. It is. It's death. Diseases will float all around amongst us and everything will die off. And then not only that, if we didn't have radars such as meteorologists that you see on the nightly news, or even in the daytime when they're presenting the weather. I think they come on in the daytime. Meteorologists come on in the daytime. The meteorologist, if he's not even on the weather channel, he's a scientist. Meteorology is a scientist of radars understanding what is coming before it comes. So if it's a cyclone, if it's a tornado, if it's a hurricane, they have to present that to us to know, okay, it's time to get out. When Hurricane Katrina came, before it came, down in the South, Louisiana, before that got completely terrorized by Hurricane Katrina, the meteorologist was there to let you know it. You got to get out. Hurry up and leave and evacuate the premises, or if not, you will greet and meet your own death and demise in a standstill. Yes, you will. So, if the meteorologist didn't exist, and the Christian feel that he don't need to exist, then we would just die out. And even that, because to not know a natural disaster is coming before it come and propel it all on the news for everybody to know, and even to show it on a global sphere somewhere as CNN, to prevent people from other countries coming here and traveling to that very city that's about to be hit and knocked away by water, huge oceans and stuff like that, is to meet and greet death. It is. You got to use common sense and logic. You can't say, well, I just read the Bible. I don't need a meteorologist because he's even a destroyer. I've heard people say that, to be a meteorologist. I hear that all the time from different people. Meteorologists think that they're God trying to predict what the weather is going to be. Only God knows what the weather is going to be. We still have to know. We still have to know what is coming. I don't want to be sitting living anywhere. If I took the time next year and moved to Florida, right, and just be down there for, say, 3 years, I don't want to be sitting nowhere and not know that a hurricane is coming in the form of a Hurricane Katrina like that has came before and not know. That's the most terrifying thing you could ever experience, is to be sitting in your living room and next thing you know, your living room is forming up and formulating with water. And now, next thing you know, water is up to your waist. And you're sitting there and looking stupid. Like, well, how does this happen? And why didn't nobody tell? And the only thing that's coming to mind is fear. Because to be living in your house space and be intruded upon by water that is becoming waste level, and now it's over on top of this stove and it's constantly filling up, you still in question what to do. You're not even, more than likely, you're not even thinking, why didn't somebody tell me? Because your fight or flight is going into motion to get out. And yet, where is to go? The only place to go is to go upstairs, like many of them people did when they went up into their attic and got up on their roof. Who's to say there's enough time to do that? Because once water start flowing into the house like that, sometimes it's not enough time to even evacuate that to get up on somebody's roof. So that's the purpose of the meteorologist. So you can never say that the meteorologist is of the devil and trying to play God's role and position. These scientists, see, many of these scientists are actually saving lives more so than these people carrying around these Bibles. The scientists, listen to me. The logic and reasoning thinking scientist is actually posing the answer of problem solving and preventing death. They're saving more lives than many of these people who are carrying Bibles who consider themselves Christians. You should never say that the meteorologist is trying to be God. He's been gifted by God or the universe to tell us what is coming. And see, I think Christian people a lot of times, not all of them, don't take this in me saying all of them. I think many of them get too comfortable in their own mindset and how things is. See, they look to Christianity and just like the predictability of that. And yet that is not all there is to life. Because if you didn't have that meteorologist to tell you that a storm is coming and about to take out all of New York, if you didn't have that, where would you be? Completely dead. Completely dead. A storm will roll in, take out New York, and you just be gone with it. But you would have wished at that time that you had that meteorologist. You got to be thankful for the scientists. Yes, you do. All religious people need to be thankful for the scientists. But when I go back and say, and it's so interesting because you have many of them, they'll scream and shout and want to commit murder. In biblical terms, the Christian will want to commit murder on a meteorologist, even for him doing his job and predicting. See, a meteorologist working his job, he can't predict what is not told, right? He has to go set up shop. And even through the satellite, that's where a lot of information come from. Way deep above, past, beyond the stars and all that. That type of stuff has to be set up so that he can see. And if a Bible thumping person is not going to take the time to get out of his comfort level of just believing in Jesus to go set up a satellite way beyond the stars so that we can know the information of what is happening even in the area of a comet crashing towards Earth or any of these planets trying to crash towards Earth. See, that can totally, completely wipe out human life in itself. Somebody has to get up out of their comfort zone and take the time and get up and say, you know what, we're about to go study these planets because these planets could be the very death of us. Something could come crash into Earth, like I said before in one of my other videos. And yet a very biblical speaking person is against that type of thing. To take a spaceship way up and figure out what could actually fall loose and hit us while we're here. For a planet to come crashing is to wipe out all mankind. It is. Because first of all, it has been said and known that if you're in the middle of New York City somewhere and you're standing up on a high rise and you drop a penny, say I'm on a high rise that's 100 feet tall, right? Or 200 feet tall. Say I'm standing up in one of the Twin Towers that don't exist, but say if it did, and I dropped a penny or a nickel and that very thing go down, it flies down and cracks somebody upside the head, it will kill them on the spot because of the speed. Consider aerodynamics in the area of sciences. When you drop an item, when you drop it, it it falls faster. It has to, because that's gravity pulling that very item towards the earth. To go up is to go down. So if I drop the nickel or the penny, I will more than likely crack somebody's brain open as they're walking the pavement down there and they don't know it's coming. Got what I'm saying? So that's why scientists, they understand that type of level. That when you drop something, it's going a million miles an hour, and especially coming from space. There's no stopping no object once it plops and comes out of space. There's no stopping that. That will wipe everything out because it's going all full speeds ahead. In fast motion like that, I don't even want to think about it. That's much more faster and much more devastating than a train hitting a brick wall. Yes, it is. A planet could literally come to Earth, fly, hit Earth, crack Earth open, and divide Earth and keep going. Because it's going at such a rapid speed. Now, some of the pieces might actually break off that planet once it crack and hit Earth. Once it hit Earth, crack it in half, and Earth becomes divided. But because you're going at such a rapid pace, there is still no stopping. And so the scientists, they have to know and understand this. They have to know and understand this, because even to have a planet fall out the sky and come and crash into Earth is to know something can be set ablaze. Something can actually be set on fire. Yes, it can. Because remember, all these structures that we're sitting in contain certain electrical devices. And not only that, light poles outside of houses and stuff like that, all this type of stuff, electrical wise, wiring is connected. So to hit something at that rapid speed is to cause an explosion as well. It will completely propel Earth to be set ablaze on fire, as if hell was really real. Yes, it would. So when I say that we must have the scientists and we must have the man who studies and reads the Bible, who is against the Bible thumper, we must have the scientist and the Bible thumper, because they're both extreme beings. A scientist, once again, could get carried away with experimenting too much and killing off life as he's doing it. But the Bible thumper as well can also prevent some of that. You know what I'm saying? So the Bible thumper will prevent the scientists from going too extreme, which was why laws was passed years ago, and you had God and all that implemented into the school, religion and all that implemented into the school to not get carried away, right? But then the religious person becomes sometimes too extreme to not want to explore and evolve farther. I'm saying even physically wise. We evolve more consciously, so that helps keep us alive more than anything. But still physically moving around, getting things in a certain manner done of trying to save and prevent death, to keep life alive, right? The religious person will a lot of times become too comfortable with his own mindset and his own Bible, thinking that the Bible itself will give you life and nothing more, right? And so the scientist has to come, sit on top of that and say, you know what? You're becoming too extreme being a Bible thumper. We have to stop some of that. We have to go out and explore more. To explore is to bring life to all generations. Yeah. It's just a deep affair. It is just a deep affair. Yes, it is. I think religion can serve, not really religion, but I think spirituality can serve in the area of getting your mind right, your spirit right, because you got to have meditation and something in order to balance you down as being a connected being to God or the universe. You need some type of connection there in order to balance you down and pay attention and try to learn and come to know your purpose, right? No religious person can teach you that. No religious text can completely teach you that. And really no scientist can teach you that. That's a man-made ordeal in itself. And when I say in the area of a man-made ordeal, I'm saying you got to take it upon yourself to want to connect with the source that is within you, but is also totally, completely all around us. The universe, God, whatever, right? But I love and admire scientists, I do. And that's not to say I'm going for one side over the other, going for the scientists over the religious man and woman. But every day I got to solve some type of problem, or some type of problem is presented, and I can't wait on Jesus. Now, I know God or the universe will help solve that thing, but there's certain things that you have to take it upon yourself right then to solve. You know what I'm saying? If you got a bill that comes in the mail, when I speak on this certain stuff like this, example, if a bill come in the mail and a bill is $11, no, the bill is for $12, right? No, let's make it bigger than that. Let's make the figures astronomical. The bill could be a $1,200 bill, right? And yet all you got is $1,100. You know that you only got 3 or 4 days to pay that bill, because you're already behind on bills. So you got to make a way to make 1,100 into 1,200. You got to figure out some type of way. And even mathematics is involved in that, in the area of the mathematician, which is in fact a scientist himself. See, I need people like that in my life, because to only rely on a Bible text is to completely lose out on life. You can become completely evicted and homeless just waiting on Jesus, when you could have got up, sat at a table, got a calculator, became your own mathematician for a half hour or even for a few days to try to figure out that calculation situation to get that bill paid. Jesus is not going to make that happen. I've never seen it myself. You know what I'm saying? If you've seen it yourself, just post a comment down below in the area of where you was short and you was about to get evicted, right? And Jesus all of a sudden was like, you know, I'm here to help make the way come true, and the possibility to help you from being thrown out your place of living establishment. Many of us had to take it. There's many situations. I'm saying miracles do happen, right? I do believe in miracles. But those type of situations don't happen all the time. There's many situations you have to take it upon yourself to solve it yourself. Because if you got some paperwork in the mail, right? And I'm speaking in the area where Jesus failed to show up, and I'm not bashing him. But if you got some paperwork in the mail and it's a deadline that you need to answer to, Jesus or any other of these other figures, they're not going to arrive and handle that deadline for you. That deadline could be the very life or death for you. It could be cancer itself. You know what I'm saying? The doctor appointment, anything like that. Somebody could be, you could have went and got a mammogram or anything, and say you got a phone call and they told you, you know what? You got to come in by such and such. That's a deadline. So that the doctor can speak to you in order to remove that. And it's another deadline to go and get surgery done so that they can take whatever out so that doesn't spread throughout your body and your bones. That's a deadline. Yes, it is. Because if you don't answer to that deadline, the very deadline will be the death of you. Yes, it will. Understand what a deadline is. So the scientists answered and helped in that, in the area of, say, where a Jesus maybe didn't, or Muhammad in the Islam faith didn't. So many of these problems, you took it upon yourself to go ahead and figure and put away all old things. But you know, I can't really bash the scientists in the area where they're helping me to cure things, solve things, recognize things for what they is, and accept things, as well as them teaching me to go with this flow of certain things. You get what I'm saying? Because to be a scientist and transmit information, that's life itself. Yes, it is. If you didn't have cable TV, if you didn't have a scientist enough to say, you know what? We should have cable TV. We should go completely digital. You wouldn't have information enough to be able to even study certain other information and practices outside of what you're currently practicing in your hometown. Get what I'm saying? You wouldn't. Somebody took it upon themselves to say, you know what? We're going to bring broadband in. This is going to be a blessing as well as a curse to humanity, so that, somebody over in China is dealing with something that they can't solve, and yet American scientists here in America, on American soil, has figured it out. And so those Chinese people need the answer. So now they got to get on the internet and look it up instead of taking a jet plane over here. The scientists actually did that. So I rever the science more so a lot of times than the actual biblical faith itself. That's not saying I'm going against anybody that practice it. It's not. So never take it in, when I'm saying this stuff, never take it in disgust. I'm just speaking on personal opinion. But I still really don't think that hell is real. Like, why? That still does not make sense when I calculate it again. Why would a God wait till I'm 95 years old to say, okay, I overviewed your life and now I'm going to sentence you to hell for infinity, to burn off in hell, knowing that you lived a long life and you did a whole lot of everything in that life. And not only that, when you got right with God, you were still not completely right. You were still doing things. We still do things. If I'm living right by God right now, I'm still doing things that is still not right. So that makes no sense. That's not clear. That's not a clear view. That's actually a dirty view. It is the mindset. To be closer to observation is to see things for what they really are. It is. Can't just go by what you're told. You can't. I'm ending this out. If I think of any more in relation to this topic of heaven and hell, I'll make another video and speak of it by another time. I wanted to make a video of me going through Netflix. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow in the evening, late evening. Some of the stuff I watch on Netflix, we got Netflix, and yet I don't really be watching it. So not trying to say I'm over here being wasteful while mom is out of the country, but I need to, and I should be watching more Netflix. I should, just to see what's on. But I done for some odd reason, I done became so addicted to YouTube. I just can't seem. I think because, Netflix, I'm all about control and self-control, and me wanting to watch what I want to watch. And on YouTube, I have that option right, whereas I don't on Netflix. You're given the option to scroll, do different things, but remember, you're being served something that a corporation is serving to you, right? Just the same with YouTube. And yet, I like the personal feel of YouTube in the area where these people that tell their stories are living, human, breathing beings. So I can go through any profile of any individual human just like me and watch something and hear them actually tell a story instead of watching it in a film that has been devised by Hollywood. But I like Netflix. Yes, I do. I'm gonna go through some videos while I'm making I'll actually turn the camera instead of looking at me, just show me going through different videos on Netflix, and hopefully there's no glare as I'm doing it. You know how you get that glare when you got your camera device pointed towards the screen? So hopefully there's no glare, but I'm gonna end this video. So what do you think about hell? Yeah, think hell exists? Is hell waiting your being? Let me know.